Want to get started. So welcome to the Maine SBDC side gig to big gig, or how to start your own home-based business in Maine. And I'm Peter Piconi. I'm a Maine SBDC advisor. I'm based out of the Waterville office. But today we're going to focus on the entrepreneurs that are either thinking about getting started or maybe have already started and are trying to figure out how it works. So we're going to stay up about 50,000 feet. So we're going to get down in the weeds a little bit, but this is more a how-to to get you started. So just a little housekeeping to start. This whole presentation will be recorded and it will be sent to you. So if you feel like you have to take notes, I get it, that's great, but we're going to send you a PDF copy of this. So any links, any knowledge, any things where you feel like you want to write it down, you're going to get it. It'll take a couple days, usually 4 to 6 days, but we will get it to you because there'll be some great information. But it's going to be recorded. Feel free to turn off your camera and we'll send you the information in 4 to 6 days. Then if you could, again, please keep yourself on mute. Toward the end, after about 30 or 45 minutes, we're going to open up for questions, right? And please do, though, if you have a burning question, put it in the chat. And at the bottom part of your screen on Zoom, there's a little icon there that says chat. Just click on that and the chat will pop up and you can type into it. All right. So just a little bit more about me. My name's Peter Piconi. I am an SBDC advisor and I'm mid-coast. So I'm right around Camden, Rockland area. That's where I live and work. And I'm a glass half full kind of guy, right? And some of my strengths, some of the things I love to do are business strategy. I love to get you early, talk about your idea, what you're doing. So this topic, starting your own business, early phases, is my favorite place to be, right? And then I love to connect you and I want to connect you to resources. These are things I like to do. All the advisors do this, but this is where we work, right? My information is the bottom there. So should you want to get some advising time with the SBDC advisors, you can contact us there. But at the end, just so you know, there'll be a QR code you can scan to register for advising. First of all, let me tell you, what is the Maine SBDC? Well, the SBDC stands for Small Business Development Center. There are 14 advisors throughout the state, and they are wicked smart. And they're my team, they're on my team. So when you get me, you get the rest of those people standing with me and behind me. And we're good at a lot of things, but some of the things that you may or may not understand already are business planning and startups. We help you do that. We can help you with credit and financing. We can help you approach for a loan. Any fiscal analysis, marketing and sales, operations management. There's a lot that we do and there's very little we can't, but if we can't find the answer, we're going to get it for you. So that's more about my team and who we are. But more importantly, some of the advisors have advised for almost 20 years. So they've been there, done that. And we have a great team around us. So I'm standing on their shoulders on some level. I learned from them. But we can help you form a successful business. From a sole prop to an LLC to an S corp. We can help you with that with the help of a good attorney. Some of those cases. So that's who we are, what we do. But I want to start out, before we get into the meat of what we're doing, I want to learn a couple of things, but I want to give you the framework for our conversation because we're going to cover a lot of territory today. But today, I want to make sure you understand that you take what knowledge is helpful, whatever it is, just take what's helpful and leave what's not, because you'll get a lot of information. Some of it won't resonate. That's fine. Take what's helpful, leave what is not, but make sure the knowledge fits who you are in your business. Okay. So there's the framework. Easy come, easy go. Now, let's get a roadmap for today. Where are we going? Like, what do you get when we're done today? What do we get? You're going to get what it takes to start a business, especially right where you're at, especially if you're just starting, or you may have something already started on the side, that side gig you're talking about. But today, the outcome is you're going to know how to form a business entity. You're going to know how to look at insurance. You'll have some guides on how to look at employees. Right? You're going to have all the things you need to get started, plus resources to help you get started and resources to maybe get an advisor if it makes sense. So the roadmap for today, number one, we're going to talk about what it takes to be an entrepreneur, the attributes, what kind of personality you might want to have. then where do you start? Then the different kinds of entities, there are 3 or 4 types. We're going to briefly touch on those. We're going to look at state permits and local regs just for Maine. So you'll understand some of that. Then we're going to talk about social license. I'll explain more about that later. We're also going to briefly touch base on employees and the things you might need, if you need those. Some of you may not need them. And then resale certificates and insurance. Some of you might be reselling goods or wholesalers. And also, the key is today, we have 2 special guests in the room. And we're going to have 2 startups in Maine, and they're going to share their experience. So I'm going to talk for about 25, 30 minutes. And then I'm going to go silent for a little bit. And then we're going to hear from our 2 businesses and why they got started, how they knew when to start, and what their business success was, and what their biggest challenge was. So don't believe me, even though I'd recommend it. You want to believe them. They're going to share with that. So that's where we're going. That's what you get today. These are 2. I'd like to thank our special guests today because they're clients of mine and they're great people and they've started things from scratch. We have Tony Small. She runs 2 businesses, a yoga studio in Port Clyde, and then also Ice House Oysters. Sean Manchester is going to try to join us. He texted me, he may not be able to make it. He runs his own business, and this is what happens. Sometimes you can't make all your obligations. So Sean's going to try to join us. He's got a great story. If he doesn't, I'll give you a little bit of his input. So thank you for joining us, our guest speakers. What I'd like to do today, I want to get to know you and who's in the room. So we're going to do a poll. So make sure to get out your phone, and that poll is going to have a question. And I want to know, where are you in the business development process? And you'll have 4 options. I want to start a business, but don't know what type. I have an idea, but it's not clear. I have an idea, and I'm not sure how to launch it. Very common. And then I have a side gig that can be a full-time gig. I know that. So what I'm going to have you do is pull out your phone, and I know everybody's got it because we never go more than 4 feet without it. I want you to scan this QR code with your phone. So open up your camera. If you grab your camera and you point your camera at that QR code, there's going to be a link that comes up. Click on that link and that poll will show up on your phone. You can click one of those items. And I'm going to let this take a few minutes. So take your time. If you can't find your phone, take a minute. Don't worry. I'm going to give this a few minutes. So as you're doing this, it'll come up on your phone and you can click on it. When you click on it, there'll be 4 different choices, and you can click on the choice. Once you click on the choice and you check the box, at the bottom of the screen, you'll have to hit submit. So there's 2 things you do. Check the box, click submit. Okay. I'm going to check the chat just in case anyone leaves a message there. Okay, great. Looks like no questions in the chat. Give people a minute to get in and get out. What I'm going to do is we're going to go look at the poll now. So let's look at the poll, and I'm going to show you. So this is the live poll. As people vote, here's the live poll for us, right? So it looks like right now, of the people that have voted, and we have 9 people that have voted, 50% of you have a side gig that can be a full-time gig. So that's awesome. I know half of the room right now has something that is probably ready to launch, but they need help, right? But 30% of you have an idea, but it's not clear. It's not certain, like you're not sure if it's fully fleshed out yet. And then there's another 20% of you that are still out there on the edges going, I have an idea, I'm not sure, or you have a business but don't know what type yet. And that's early on. So right now, thank you all for the people that voted. This is awesome. So now I know who's in the room and you know what's going on. So, and our guests that are in the room, you're welcome to vote too. Our guest speakers, if you want to vote, that's great, because you might have another business you want to start. It's called a serial entrepreneur. I'm one of them. Okay, so now we know, thank you all for doing the poll. We now know who's in the room. We know that half of you actually are probably ready to launch. You just need some help technically. And the rest of you, we're going to work on the definition of the idea, and I can help both of you. All right, let's look at. Okay, we're going to go back to the poll. So let's talk a little bit about, we're going to back up a little bit, get to 50,000 feet. So why even start a business, right? Some of you already know this, but let's just at least cover it for just a second here. But the business gives you the opportunity to create your own destiny. This is you. You're manifesting a better income, maybe. Maybe you're making a difference in your community because they don't have an ice cream shop and now you're serving them ice cream, right? You're giving back, right? Hopefully you're making some money, but you're reaching your full potential too as a person. You're going, I feel better when I'm running my own gig. I don't want to work for someone else. But this gives you the opportunity to contribute not only to your family resources, but your community in general. If you're giving a service, I have a guy that's doing a splitting wood. That's a great service. Right? And it lets you enjoy what you're doing and have fun doing it, assuming you've chosen well, assuming it's something you like, and we still think that's the case, right? So let's just to get started, let's take what it looks like to start a business. Like, what kind of person are we looking at, right? The question you want to ask yourself is, are you a self-starter, right? Or do you need someone to kind of give you a list and then you get started? Good question. But if you're in the room already, you're probably a self-starter because you're here. And then do you plan and organize well? Are you an executor? Do you like to get things done? Are you transactional? Or are you like, I'm going to work with the people and I need the people to help me get there? Good to know. Then do you get along with different personalities? This is big. Let's say you had a service business. If you're in a service business, you better be able to help all different kinds of people. People that are grumpy, people that are not. And then, are you good at making decisions? This is key, because the business doesn't go forward without you making decisions every day. If you choose not to make decisions, the business runs you. And then this is a really good question. Do I have the physical stamina and emotional stamina to run my business? It's not just physical, but there's an emotional toll that happens when you're thinking about this baby that you've breathed to life, and now you're thinking about it 24/7. Another big question. Some of you may have families, some of you not, but now you're driving this impetus of this whole nother entity. And are they going to support your efforts doing it? Are they on board or are they not? Are they like, hey, we need to go to the soccer game on Sunday? And you're like, no, I got to open the store. That could, that could be a tough spot to be. And then a bigger question is, can you create a network to help you, right? Do you go out and get an SBDC advisor to help you strategize or with financials? Or do you go talk to your local banker or talk to the local marketing person and get some free advice? Can you create the network around you? Other things I want you to think about as we go down this road. I know some of you have a gig that's ready to launch, but there's an income level that you may or may not have. And income for startups go up and down a lot because you can't identify the market all the time or know how much volume because you're just getting started. So your income could vary a lot. I had 2 other jobs just to start my full-time gig, just to make it work, right? And there is a little bit of risk. If you invest $5,000 in a wood splitter and a chainsaw or whatever you need to do to start a logging type or home fireplace, you could lose that if things don't, or if you don't get enough clients, right? So there is a little bit of risk, right? And long hours and hard work are part of the deal. Unless you can do it, this side gig is only 16 hours a week, and then it works better. But consider there's going to be a lot of startup things you have to learn. That's longer hours, harder work. And with that longer hours, you might have a little more stress and that harder work because you may or may not be used to this level of responsibility and thinking about something more so than you used to before. And you have complete responsibility, right? That's hard for some people. Some people, they don't even flinch. But I know when I started, for the first couple of months, I was the sole responsibility. And if I didn't make a decision, things didn't get done. And for the first couple of months, I had to figure that out. And I used other businesses to talk to. Now, the one thing that is a startup mentality is you have a lower quality of life until things get established. It may take you up to a year or two to make enough income for it to actually pay you back. Or it may take 6 months, or there may be a change in the economy, right? Things overseas change and price of oil goes up, people stop driving, less people come into your town. Let's say you're a tourist basement. So your quality of life can be driven by other things besides how hard you work. Okay, we've talked about some of the attributes of an entrepreneur. Let's get in some more of the nuts and bolts, right? And I want to show you this because it can be a little scary. And one of the other SBDC advisors showed me this, and I thought it was perfect to put in the webinar, is that when it feels scary to jump, that's exactly when you jump. Otherwise, you end up staying in the same place your whole life. Some people are built for this, some are not. You decide. But with that in mind, let's jump into the next portion of this, which is more the nuts and bolts, right? Where do you start? Some of you have said, I've got a business, I'm ready to go. I just need how to figure it out. The first thing you do, if you can, prepare a business plan. Some of you have already started, like, why write a business plan? I already know. Well, failure to plan is planning to fail, right? So the business plan helps with all of these things. And I'm not going to go into these, but it tells you, it gives you the roadmap for your business, right? I want to see the roadmap. That's how you know you're going to get there. You notice when I got into this webinar, I gave you a roadmap right away. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're talking about. This is your roadmap. You can write it out. Could be short as long. We have templates for these, so we can help you. Grab your local advisor. So that's where you start. And one of the most common questions we get is like, hey, I've got the business. I need to form the entity. And the entity type could be a couple different ones. But the entity is important. And you want to ask a couple questions before you form the entity. One of the questions is, what's my form of ownership and why? Right? Do I want to be a sole proprietor because it's just me? Or do I have a lot of assets and I want to be an LLC to protect my asset? We're going to dive into some of these things a little bit later, but these are the questions I'm going to help you answer. And the entity is important because it has to facilitate your business goals. Let's say you start your business and it grows so fast that you need a different entity type. We're going to talk about that. So you don't want to start with one entity and have to grow out of it. You want to grow into it. So we're going to talk about that. And then your entity has different obligations. Sometimes there's tax obligations. Sometimes there's paperwork. Sometimes there's a lot of paperwork. If there's requirements, you need an attorney to do all the paperwork, right? These are the questions we're going to help you answer. And then certain entity types like an S Corp or a C Corp, there's all sorts of tax implications that you have to file with the IRS. These are all the questions that go into saying, what entity do I get? So let's go down the road. Now that we know some of the questions, what does it look like? Today, we're going to stay up at about 25,000 feet. And here's the 4 main entities we're going to talk about today. We have a sole proprietorship, sometimes known as a DBA. Then we have a partnership, also known as a limited liability partnership. That's in there. We have a limited liability company known as an LLC. And then we have a corporation. And there's all sorts of variations on these, but we're going to keep it at this level today. If you need more help to get into the nitty-gritty, we're going to grab an advisor for that. So if you're a sole proprietorship, I'm going to talk about what they look like, but advantages and disadvantages from a general level. One thing I want to also preface this whole conversation with is we are not tax or attorney professionals. That's not where we operate. We have people that do that. So do not take this advice as this is what I need. If you need help with forming your entity, ask your attorney. We can help you look at the options, then use them as a reference. But if there's any legal implications or any tax implications, we're going to point you toward your tax attorney or your tax person. They're the experts. We're the people that help you ask the right questions. So just to be clear, what are the advantages of a sole prop, right? They're really easy. It's usually really inexpensive. Sometimes there's no expense at all in your town. That income goes right to you, so it's very simple. It's really easy to dissolve a sole proprietorship because it's just you. So very, very simple. Disadvantages, it's unlimited liability because you're the entity. Like for me, I had Peter Piconi Guide Service. So I'm the entity. So all of my assets, my car, my house, because it's me, they can come after those assets for me. So that's a lot of liability. So as soon as I went from a sole proprietorship, I moved my business to an LLC, so it was more protected. We'll talk about that. Sole props also have funding difficulties because of their liability. Banks are less likely to fund an entity. Not that they won't, but they might ask you to be an LLC before they fund you. It's less attractive to employees because they know it can vary quite a bit. It is simple in the fact you just file the DBA with your local municipality, but that can have its own set of challenges. So that's sole prop from a high level. Now, what about a partnership? How does that work, right? The advantages is they're pretty easy to get squared away. They're inexpensive, like a sole prop, and there's shared financial commitment. So it's now you and your partner, so that spreads the burden. And now because of a partnership, you could expand it to incorporate 2 employees. So there's a benefit there. Some of the things that are less optimal for some businesses is the joint and individual liability. So now that liability goes to both partners, right? So you're still personally, you're there. Or if there's a disagreement between the partners and they can't make a decision and move forward, that's harder. So if you have things that are combative, or it can slow the business down quite a bit because you're not on the same page, right? The other thing is, now that it's a partnership, you have to share the profits. So let's say you have a great year, you're going to split it with your partner, no matter what, even if he's working less. But you can set that up. That's where you see the attorney to set it up. So if you work more, you can get more. There's a partnership. Then there's also what's called a limited liability partnership. This is, and we bring this up because this could be structurally better for you, right? And it's similar to a partnership with 3 exceptions. The limited partnership is only liable up to a certain amount of invested capital. And the limited partner can't have direct control. So it's almost like a silent partner. So you can limit their ability. And then that limited partner can transfer ownership and continue. He could transfer it back to you, his shares, right? So a little more flexibility. This is when you're going to figure this out and then go see an attorney to help you set up all the nitty-gritty for this. But it's another option out there if you have partners. So what about a limited liability company, also known as the LLC? Well, the LLC is a hybrid between a sole proprietorship and a partnership and a corporation, right? You need a written operating agreement called Articles of Organization. We can help you with that too. And there's limited personal liability for members. So no personal assets are involved. It's just any business assets. So what about this? How does this one work, right? Limited liability company. Let's get more specifically how it works. The advantages are combines the benefits of a partnership and a corporation, but with less of the expense. There's limited personal exposure and a lot less restrictions. So this is also in Maine, it's like $180 to form this with the state. You can have an attorney do it, right? Some of the disadvantages, there's limited lifetime. So you might have to set up an expiration date for your LLC, right? Self-employment taxes are different. So you might want to have a tax person help you to file taxes. And for some professionals, you cannot be an LLC. And there's a list for that. And I'm happy to share that offline if you want to come at me and chat about that. And the corporation, which is probably not a fit for any of you, but it's out there. And this is for larger entities because there's tax benefits, but just know that the advantages are the owners are separate, which is great. So any debt doesn't transfer you to, but you can sell stock now, which makes you really good for capital investment. And it's a well-established structure that people understand from investment point of view. The disadvantages, it's time consuming. Someone's going to have to set this up for you, like an attorney. Probably you want some tax advice. So I've seen it cost $1,500 to $2,000 or $3,000 just to set up a corporation the correct way. Now, what about another thing called what we call social license? If you're starting your business, you have the right social license, but what is social license? It's also known as be a good neighbor. Like, let's say you live in a small town. I'm in Camden, right? And what if I'm not known as a nice guy, right? But I started an ice cream shop, but I'm the guy that is a bit of a curmudgeon, right? So do I have the social license to start that ice cream shop? Well, maybe, maybe not, right? But if I'm already known as someone that maybe gets a lot of parking tickets and do that, I may not be the best person to serve people ice cream. People may not like that. So there's a social license that you don't have to pay for, but you have to earn in your community. I'm just calling that out. That's part of what you want to do as an entrepreneur, right? And what does it take to be a good social neighbor or to get this? You want to know your neighbors, right? Consider your investment into your community. Create that investment, volunteer your time. Become a member of Rotary, right? Or Toastmasters, or join the select board. Be involved, right? Consider some alignment to local perspective. What if your town doesn't want certain things sold in your community, right? Is a family on board? That's social license you really want to get. Is a wife and kids on board, right? Are they part of your team? All these people want to help you move forward. So get that social license as you move along. The question is let's say you have a name now. Form the entity, you want to form the name. The very first thing you want to do is check with the state and check to see that your name's not taken already. And there's a link here, and you're going to get this. You can click on this link and go check your name out. As soon as you check your name out, then you form the entity. Yeah, that's what, so order of operations, check the name. Once you know the name's not taken in Maine, that's just in Maine, then go form the entity. If it's a sole prop, you can do a DBA with your local town. And there's a great website called Business Answers. It's run by the state of Maine. It is phenomenal. These are your tax dollars at work. It's called Business Answers. There's a link here, and that link takes you to a really cool page. And this is where you can get find your permits, the licenses you're going to need. You can come talk to us about it just to get more information too, but go to the Maine Department of Community Development. It's called the DCD. And it's a one-stop licensing center. And if you click on this link, it's called Business Answers. It is phenomenal. This is what it looks like. When you go there, you can register and you can click on two things. I want to start a business in Maine, or I want to search for a license and permit. See it on the top right. So when you get to this page, it's really easy to navigate. This is a really good resource in addition to your advisor if you want to, but you could probably get a lot of answers here too. So what about the local rules, right? Like if you have a business, but you're in a small town like Lincolnville, Maine, which is on the coast, it's just north of Camden. You want to call your local city hall, your town office, and go, hey, I'm starting a hot dog stand. What do I need to know? Or I'm starting a log cutting service. I'm going to get firewood for people. Your local town office and say, yep, that's good. Good for you. No paperwork needed. Or they're going to say, you need to file some paperwork so we know where you're operating, what you're doing. If you're doing a business that requires a domicile or something, the local code enforcement officer might want to come see you just to make sure everything's up to speed. So check with them as soon as you can. Now, what about employees, right? This could be a really deep dive. This is a lot of information, so forgive me, because this is a lot of information, but you're going to get this. But the business owner has certain duties and the employees have certain duties, and I've listed them. The business owner, well, you want to register for your EIN or your federal employer identification number. It's basically like a tax ID number for you. You're going to register for state income tax if you have employees, for withholding and unemployment insurance, workers' compensation. You're going to get the required labor posters if you have employees. Some of you may or may not need this, but these are some of the things you can do. And for employees, they're going to have to fill out a W-4 and I-9, which is your eligibility verification form. You're going to report any new employees to the Department of Health and Human Services, and you're going to keep the employee docs on file. This is the most basic checklist there is. We actually have what's called a startup checklist. It's on our webpage. That's phenomenal. That'll help you walk through it. But if you have employees, come see us. Let's have a chat. Now, what if you're selling a product or a service? How does it work? Right? The very first thing you want to do is obtain a sales tax number. You have to have that before you can sell stuff, because you have to charge sales tax on it. So first, you start by filing an application for tax registration with Maine Revenue Services, or MRS. It's right where you start, right? And you can get your EIN number, which is your federal number first if you want. That's helpful. You can apply online or download the application at this link. Again, you're going to get this. Don't have to write it down. The webinar will be shared with you via PDF. If you're reselling things, apply for the resale certificate, which also can be found at the link above. If you're planning on wholesale purchases, if you're buying a product, let's say you're buying a product from someone that's making it and then you're reselling it, you're going to need a resale certificate. Or if you're buying products from overseas, right? What if you're selling lobster keychains and you're buying from China for 50 cents and selling them for 5? You're going to have to get this. Now, what about insurance? Yeah, you're going to need something, right? There's a lot of options. What I would do is, if you own a home or have some car insurance, you can call that provider and say, do you have business insurance? Or there's a lot of local entities in the state of Maine that are right in your town. I encourage you to do that. Like, for example, in my town is Allen Insurance, and they have an office in town. There's all sorts of local insurance agencies. Call them and say, hey, I need business insurance, and they can help walk you through it. Or if they don't provide it, they can give you the right person to talk to in another organization. Make sure you have that. Super important. And it's not always that expensive. So I just took you through 24 minutes of side gig to big gig, right? So thank you for holding on. That was a lot of information in a short time frame. So thank you. But now we have about 20 more minutes. So what I want to do for the rest of the time is I want you to listen to at least one small business owner, because I know Tony's in the room, Tony Small, and they're going to answer 2 questions. They're going to tell their story so you can learn from them. I started my own business and I can share, but I think it's more impactful to hear from them. So I've known Tony for many years, 6 or 7 years, and I helped her get started with some of their oyster farms, and I helped her with her yoga studio. So I've seen her through all the ups and downs. So I'm going to let her tell her story and do her introduction herself. But Tony, go ahead and unmute yourself.
I just did.
Hi, Tony. Thank you for joining. It's a pleasure to have you. And for our audience, Tony's going to answer 2 questions. She's going to start off by how did you make the decision to go into business? How did you know it was time? And then she's going to also talk about her greatest challenge and then hopefully her greatest success too. So Tony, take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks, Peter. Hi, welcome everyone. It's always exciting. I remember taking some of these classes many moons ago. I'm not sure actually that I remember a very particular moment in time where I decided that I wanted to work for myself. I was really good at sort of picking up and working for other people and doing what they needed to do. I moved to Port Clyde, Maine, where I make my home, in 2006. I worked for the local library for a couple of years, and then I was sort of at this pivotal, like, watershed moment where I thought, well, maybe I'll go back to school. I was thinking about graduate school. And the field I wanted to go into, the cost of borrowing versus the return on investment felt a little dicey. And it sort of felt like, well, I was going to have to leave Maine to make enough money to pay back that kind of college debt at my age. So I decided against that. And I think it was probably like in that soup of, what am I doing? I had a bunch of strengths. I had a bunch of skills, some of which are more profitable than others. so at some point in there, I started teaching movement. I started teaching Zumba Gold classes, basically, and Zumba. Actually, it was Zumba and Zumba Gold classes. And I opened up, I did a smart thing completely by accident. I held my very first class in the middle of February, and I made it free. I just said, okay, like if people are going to figure out who I am and if they want to try this, and Zumba was pretty new and certainly new to Maine at the time. And I made it free. Happily, I got a really big haul because 56 people turned up for this free class. And so I was like, oh, well, here's something. So it was kind of, I wish I could say it was really like I had this very strategic plan. I did not. I had a very organic way, and I continue to have a very organic way of being in the decision-making process. But I will say, um, I am also somewhat strategic in after a few months of teaching classes. I did not have 56 people turn up every time, but I had a good crowd for the winter. And then daylight savings came back and people are outside in their gardens. And so my evening classes waned and I was down to, just a few people. And I was like, well, this isn't sustainable. But I'd picked up a morning class and I discovered that the retirees that I was happy to teach were happy to have a consistent class. And so I taught that class Monday and Wednesday like clockwork for almost 10 years until COVID closed us down. And on the back of that, so I was like, okay, this is a demographic that has the time, has the money, has the inclination, and it wants to work on taking care of their health. So I then added a yoga teaching certification. And I had this very misguided idea. Once again, you learn by doing, but I thought, oh, well, the same people will come to my yoga classes. Like they'll come for the Zumba and they'll be warmed up and then they'll stay for yoga. And didn't work that way at all. I discovered I had a whole new population of people who wanted yoga. So similar, I did evenings, I did mornings. I ended up taking over a slot from a woman who'd been teaching on the peninsula for years. She left, and it was very organic. But I was also somewhat open to that being organic. I also worked as a gardener, so I had that income was sort of consistent through a big part of the year, and then the teaching. So as Peter was saying, like I kind of had a potpourri, and I continue to have multiple streams of income. And I let the gardening go once the teaching became obviously something I was going to make more income at, and year round. And it was really kind of what I wanted to be doing. I still have a few gardens, people who just won't let me stop. But so it was an organic process. So then I was teaching a lot. I was teaching up in Rockland. I've been working one-on-one with folks, a lot of word of mouth, again, to the social license. Like if you can establish yourself as someone, as a go-to person, someone that people will refer, like, oh, I think Tony goes to people's homes and does, she'll come to your house and do a personal yoga session with you. So I got referred out that way and made made connections with students I still teach to this day on a weekly basis. So as much as you can, I think like getting down to the simplest format. What was interesting was, I say that, but I was kind of getting into a space just before COVID and our shutdown started, where I was kind of spread a little thin because I was trying to attract new students. And so I felt like I was kind of driving all over the place a little more than I wanted to be. And COVID shut me down. And what was interesting was that meant my entire teaching business moved online. From Friday afternoon, I sent out an email saying classes start Monday online. Here's how you get to class. I was nervous because my student demographic is a bit older, and I was a little apprehensive about how that was going to go in terms of the technology of getting on a computer. Zumba, because the nature of its music and dance, really kind of like I tried for 2 weeks and shut it down. It's since Zumba itself, the company, has built an infrastructure to help people teach online, but it didn't exist in those first few weeks. But yoga successfully transitioned online and actually remains there to this day. So what I'm actually currently currently in the process of, I've had this core group of students. I continue to have one-on-one work. Some people come to my studio in person. A lot of people have remained online. And I am actually currently in the process of re-visioning or trying to spin out my next iteration of that business into a digital course, like offering an opportunity for people, and particular, like, again, addressing my demographic, my student demographic, around balance, and building a digital course that somebody could absorb, in Washington State, in Honolulu, in Japan, in wherever they are and speak English, that they could come. And so I'm sort of like setting myself up a lot more strategically now into, okay, how do I build this business from this particular constraint, which is I'm here in this machine world and in this little space. What I will also say, to segue over to Ice House Oysters, is that moment of closing down my traveling all over the place actually offered an opportunity, in the sense that my husband and I run this small oyster farm, and it's a lot of physical work. And suddenly it meant there were two of us, because I could sort of close up my shop teaching by 1 o'clock and head over to the farm across the street and be able to work with him for 3 or 4 hours and kind of push that business along, which is very hands-on, gotta do it. So that's kind of the evolution of my my teaching business. And again, how did I know it was time? I had a lot of circumstantial pieces push me. But I think one of the things that can be always interesting is, like, if you have an idea for a business and you have a skill set or this side gig that you want to kind of move to the forefront to become a bigger project. I do think it's a lot of work, as Peter said. I think it requires being curious and being a constant student of what's happening. So I'm now in a class specifically around designing a digital course online, in the online world. And I would say I've probably been paying attention to the woman who teaches that class. She's been on my radar for the last probably year and a half. And I think it's important to kind of like let yourself keep moving the ball forward. Sometimes it's really like you have to, like, if you've got an opening day, like a launch, like where you're setting something up, there are probably people who could give you really concise advice, like, okay, reverse engineer from your launch day, right? I'm in this sort of interesting organic space of, like, it just kind of, one thing has flown into the other, into the other, into the other. Within that, I've done a lot of experimenting around what time of day do people come, what kinds of topics are people interested in. People who are in chairs, generally, like for chair yoga, aren't going to be out the door at 8 o'clock in the morning. They're going to be at 10 o'clock in the morning. Like, they need a little bit more time to get going. Everybody else who's up and down off a mat, 8:15 is fine. But it does require some experimenting and trying things out, and be willing to be I would say that's probably the greatest challenge and my success, is that I have been adaptable. Like, I think being friendly enough with your customers that you can ask questions, that you can pivot to their needs, becomes a really big deal. Peter, I don't know how, if I have time to go into Ice House. Like, I don't want to, if Sean's arrived, I don't want to take over for two.
Actually, Tony, that's perfect. Thank you. Actually, that's probably enough time for us today, because I want to leave a little room for questions.
Great. Good.
So
Good.
Thank you for sharing. Tony, that was
Yeah.
helpful. And just to point out, Sean probably won't, but he's been texting me, but he's not gonna be able to make it today. But I want to just point out that, because part of Tony's story is she pivoted hard, and she pivoted around COVID, right? And a lot of businesses did, and she went digital. She moved from in-person to digital to back to both. So there was like kind of like a hybrid almost. Tony, if I'm calling that right. So just to summarize, she made the pivot just by starting out, but going, I'm going to give something free. So you have to give yourself to get more, right? So be aware that you have to give a lot, but that always comes back to you. I want to make that point, because she gave first. She did a free seminar. 56 people showed up. She went, oh, wow, this is going to happen. That's when I knew. As soon as Tony told me that story, I knew the business would work, right? because there's the market. They showed up, right? So I want to point that out. And she talked a lot about her challenges and her successes, but it was really, I think some of the take home, Tony, from your story for me was just the fact that you were adaptable, and you brought that word up right away. Adaptable, resilient in terms of what you did. And I want to point out she worked with an advisor. She always had someone to talk to bounce things off of, right? So I want to point out that's a big deal to have resources and create the network around you. I was an owner and I did it by myself for 3 years, and it was, I don't know why I did that. And it took me a while to learn to reach out, and that's another skill set you can get for that. So I just want to make that clear. But I want to do this while we still have a few more minutes. I want to open it up to questions from the group right there. So feel free to just unmute yourself, have some questions, but while we're waiting and people are cogitating on their questions, you can scan this code and you can get your no cost, confidential, free business advisor.